And joining us now on the debate, Laurel Broughton, Minister of Children and Youth Services and the Liberal candidate in Etobicoke Lakeshore. Sherry DeNovo, running for re-election for the NDP in Parkdale High Park. Tim Grant, he's the Green Party candidate in Trinity Spadina. And Laurel Rothman, National Coordinator of Campaign 2000. We should say we invited a progressive Conservative candidate to join our discussion tonight, but the party declined our invitation. But you all accepted it, and we're glad to have you around the table tonight. Let's just start with this. Here's an excerpt from the Guelph Mercury from earlier this summer, just to set the table for our discussion. In 2009, the overall rate of poverty in Ontario was 13.1%, up from 11.2% in 2007, the last provincial election year, incidentally. This means the growth rate of poverty in Ontario from 2007 to 2009 was a staggering 17%, a figure that is substantially higher than for any other province. Let's have a bit of a blunt discussion here, if we can, folks, about what is possible and what is not when it comes to poverty. Can each of you, Laurel Broughton, you first, can you tell us with a straight face that in the midst of this great recession, we actually can do something about reducing poverty?
Absolutely, we can do something. We have advanced a comprehensive plan which focuses on kids first. Our goal is to lift 25% of children out of poverty within 5 years. If you look at the LIM 50 poverty line, we now have 19,000 fewer kids living in poverty in 2009 than in 2008. And why? How did we do that? We created something called the Ontario Child Benefit. And that investment in families is lifting mums and their children above the poverty line in concrete ways with concrete dollars.
Let's understand, that's
yes.
$1,100 per kid per year, is that how it works?
Yes, and our platform will see that increase to $1,310.
Okay, Sherry DeNovo? Can you do something about poverty in the midst of the Great Recession?
Absolutely you can, but that's not what's happened under Dalton McGuinty. I remember Steve, when I was first elected, he voted in a 25% raise for all MPPs, and now we're on track to raise poverty rates 25% in 5 years. And in fact, he slashed the special diet allowance from people with disabilities on Ontario disabilities to the tune of about that raise for MPPs, $250 for some folk who make just over $1,000. And for children's poverty, there's no acceptable level for children's poverty. No acceptable level for children's poverty. And we have the highest rate of children's poverty now since the Great Depression.
But they did create the Ontario Child Benefit.
Well, actually, they didn't, and they were clawing it back from the feds, and then they reintroduced it, is really what happened. But the bottom line is children are still poorer now than they've ever been since the Great Depression. And for all the promises made by the two big parties, Campaign 2000 will talk about that, I'm sure, that they would end child poverty in the year 2000. We are in worse shape than we've ever been, and that's the status of Dalton McGuinty's Ontario.
Oh,
Tim?
sure.
Well, and it's true. I mean, I think the Liberals have made several good programs, but things are worse. We have more people waiting for affordable housing, more seniors showing up at food banks. So there's a lot of, that things have deteriorated, and it's not entirely the government's fault, but I think we need to bring new tools to the discussion. And I'm a brand new candidate running for the first time, and the surprise for me at the doorstep is, of all the issues I've taken to the doorstep, it's my proposal for junk food taxes, driving up the price of junk food, but using that money specifically to fund school food programs, free breakfast and lunch programs, and the low-income fruit and vegetable supplements. And what's really impressed me from talking to people is that even the most fiscally conservative residents of my downtown neighborhoods appreciate that the lifetime cost of having hungry kids in school and low-income people who can't afford fruits and vegetables because their rent's so high is too high. And so we Greens bring new tools to the tax.
Follow up? But how would that work? How would you tax junk food to raise money to put towards other more valuable things?
Well, 30 U.S. states and major cities are actually looking very seriously at this. And New York State found that with a 1 cent per ounce tax on soda pop, they would reduce consumption 24%. Illinois, with a 2 cent per ounce tax, found that that alone, again just on soda pop, not even touching the rest of junk food, which we know causes harm and drives up healthcare costs, would reduce the rate of diabetes in Illinois 18%. Save healthcare costs of $350 million, but it also generates $800 million that can go to good.
Just before I go to you, Laurel, can I just find out, is that something you've looked at?
I need to respond to some of the stuff that Sherry has said, so you got to give me a chance to do that.
I will give you a chance, but on this issue of this junk food tax, have you looked at that?
No, I can't speak to a junk food tax, but what I can tell you is in terms of student nutrition, I mean, we have drastically expanded the resource dollars that we give out in student nutrition programs, in breakfast programs across the province. And all of that is part of a comprehensive strategy to focus on children and reduce child poverty. And Sherry is really inaccurate in the depiction that she made. It is making a difference. So Ontario Child Benefit, full day kindergarten, the investments that we're making in kids and families, you can't say that a 42% increase for a single parent on Ontario Works with 2 children is nothing. It's significant. And in the context of a global recession, we are lifting families out. Think what would have happened if Ontario hadn't had such a comprehensive strategy for kids and families.
Laurel, you are not aligned with any of the parties here today. So
we are not aligned with any of the parties. We watch the numbers carefully, and what I really want to say to people is we can not just reduce, we can eradicate poverty. Many Western European nations and the OECD are doing much better than we are. There are a number of things we need to do. We need to strengthen those public policies, whether it's the child benefit. We need a serious, substantive reform of social assistance. We need all parties to commit to continuing that process that's started, because as well as we need a more resilient labor market. That means both minimum wages leading to living wages. So I think what I'll say to people, I want everybody to know, it's costing us between $32 and $38 billion a year in Ontario in terms of healthcare costs, criminal justice system costs, and lost wages. This was a study done by a range of well-respected economists for the Ontario Association of Food Banks. So it's a we issue for all of us, and we in the anti-poverty community want to see a commitment to a poverty-free Ontario. In 2008, 25 and 5 made sense. It was bold, it was brave, it was important in the middle of the recession, and that all parties supported it. But looking forward, we can do better.
Can I just follow up here? Because this is an interesting angle that you've raised here. Poverty costs.
Yeah.
$38 billion a year, you say. It costs us through having to put people in jail or all of that kind of stuff. Fight crime, subsidize them on welfare, whatever. If we spent money more intelligently, what could that be reduced to?
Oh, well, if we look at countries where they've made significant progress, industrialized countries, let's call it under 5%. I'm not going to say it will be 0. There will always be people who will fall through the crack. But to eradicate is to pull out that root, to really change our structures in the labor market and in public policy. And we have the possibility and the opportunity and the resources to do that here. Ideally, I should say, with a federal government that gets involved, but we'll get to that later maybe.
Okay. We all know how rare it is when all members of the Ontario legislature come together and vote as one on something. But you did on this, right? It was a couple of years ago maybe, that you voted for, well, I have the date here actually, May 6, 2009, unanimously passed the Poverty Reduction Act. Sherry, to you first. How well do you think the government so far has stuck by the spirit and the law behind that act?
Abysmally.
Abysmally?
Abysmally.
You're not going to cut them any slack at all?
No, absolutely not. According to food banks, food bag usage is up. Some by as high as, I think Daily Bread said 23% in a couple of years. And a third of those users are children. It's child poverty that the government said that they wanted to focus on, that they're doing so badly at. I mean, this is the reality on the street. And absolutely to the Campaign 2000's point, we know, we've had studies, 45 to 55,000 per year is what it costs to keep somebody homeless. We know that. We have 150,000 families waiting in excess of 12 years. Never been so bad for affordable housing. We have thousands and thousands of families who are underhoused. We have children. I had one in my parking lot of my church who is living in a trailer going to school. Teachers know this. They confront this every day, and it's getting worse.
Okay, Tim, the Poverty Reduction Act, unanimously supported in the legislature, requires the government to do a number of things. How have they done?
Well, I think they've had some good initiatives. I think we heard Laurel mention some of them, but I agree with Sherry. I think we failed on many in many respects, and of course we've been hammered by a recession, loss of manufacturing and tax capacity and so on. But I think for us it's really a question of what new tools can we bring to all of this. And I'm in a downtown riding, for example, where the only housing, to talk about affordable housing, the only housing being built are condos. So we think that it's time to start saying that all new condos, 30% of those units should be affordable and available for people with special needs. 10% should also be for families, so people don't have to move out of downtown condos.
This is for privately built, privately developed condos.
Yes, and our party's actually talked to 4 of the largest developers, condo developers, and 3 of them are okay with it as long as it's part of the building code and all developers, a level playing field for all developers.
The bill on the order paper just to that effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the point is we need to have, solving poverty takes many, many strategies. There's a lot of different pieces in this. And one of them is we need to have mixed communities, not building affordable housing out in the distant ends of the burbs. We need poor people living side by side with middle and rich people on the same elevator in the same buildings, part of the same community. And we think this is a strategy to get us there.
Okay, Laurel Broughton, how well have you done implementing the Poverty Reduction Act?
Listen, we're not naive as to the challenge that is ahead. And when you set a mark, I think a historic benchmark, and you say you're going to do it, you take steps forward, and I've given you the numbers and we've made progress. But I want to talk about the comprehensive nature of the strategy. It's about breaking the intergenerational cycle. And so it has investments with respect to full-day kindergarten, investments with respect to creating a Best Start Child and Family Center network, creating an opportunity for families to lift themselves and their kids out of poverty. We've made significant investments in housing, $2.5 billion in investments in housing. Almost every ministry sits at the table, and we're all doing our part and moving the benchmark forward. But you can't forget that, for example, the NDP has a record too. We're in the legislature. They might have voted for the legislation, but they voted against the 6 increases to social assistance, to the OCP. They didn't raise their voice when we were fighting the federal government and saying you can't walk away from the National Child Care Agreement. Where are you? The province had to step up to protect those child care spaces at $63.5 million. Those are significant investments for families that make a difference as to whether we can lift them above the poverty line.
Let's just clarify here, because I want everybody to understand what's going on. You proposed the Ontario Child Benefit. Your party did vote against it, but it was in the budget. And opposition parties always vote against budgets. So when you say they don't care about kids because they voted against the Ontario Child Benefit, it's kind of not...
So let me give the other example was with
context?
respect to raising a voice when the federal government walked away. That would have been an easy opportunity, and we didn't see them. And similarly, we don't see the Conservative Party here. I mean, these are important questions to ask Tim Hudak as to what would he do. The history in this province a number of years ago was very, very challenging for those living in poverty.
Let me find out from the other Laurel whether this government is entitled to the laurels that Laurel thinks there should be entitled to.
I think what we'll say is we're pointed in the right direction, and there have been some small gains. There have been some very obvious absences.
For example?
One is dental care. There was a commitment to move forward on dental care for, I believe it was, everyone. We've made some strides with kids, and of course, I'm supportive of that. But we know that children live in poverty because their parents do, and we all probably remember the front page stories and our knowledge of adults who can't move into training or jobs if they need dental care and or lots of other health-related things. So that's one thing. And the other major omission is childcare. It's true that all-day kindergarten is a major addition to our education system. Families who can access it are pleased to do so. But not only was complementary childcare not well thought out or made affordable for parents who need both education and childcare working closely together, but for children under 4 whose families want to attend training, go into work, stay in work, maybe get a promotion, we're losing childcare centers in the north.
Let me ask you about
Greater
the Conservatives.
Toronto.
We don't do anything as dramatic here as putting an empty chair because the Conservatives aren't here. But the fact is they're not here. We invited them to be, and they're not here. We have some sense about what the other 3 mainline parties are suggesting when it comes to alleviating poverty. You've dealt with this issue for 25 years. I know I've been talking to you about these things. The Conservative Party in general, how well do they do on this issue?
Well, I would say there's a real absence of any detail of any kind. I don't even know if the word poverty is in the written platform statements that I've seen. So to be fair, I'll say we've also written to all the leaders with a series of questions. We're going to be releasing a comparative grid on what they have to say about our issues. But so far, I've not seen very much at all.
Okay. Sherry, I think we do need to ask about the Great Recession. In the best of all possible worlds, of course, the economy would be great. There'd be lots of money flowing into the Treasury and able to fund some of the programs that you've talked about today. But the fact is, the numbers have gone to hell. Do you not think it's appropriate to cut the government some slack, given what's happened to the balance sheets of this province?
Absolutely not,
Why not?
Steve. Here's why. Because we're the capital of poverty in Canada right now. Childcare, take that as an example. Quebec on one side of us, $7 a day for daycare. Manitoba on the other side of us, $17 a day. It's not even a partisan issue. Here in Ontario, ask any parent, they'll tell you if they can find a spot. Only 1 in 10 children, or 1 in 8, depending on the study you look at, has a spot. And the cost is well over $50 a day.
The sainted Lucien Bouchard says Quebec can no longer afford $7 a day daycare.
Okay, well, Manitoba, $17 a day. I mean, other provinces are doing better than we're doing, even given the same recession. So that's the immediate, but as you heard, other countries are doing significantly better than we are.
Should we be doing better than we are on this, as Sherry suggests?
There's more work to do on childcare. There's no doubt about it.
Sounds like a yes.
There's more work, and we've said that we're going to do that work. But let's remember, we're the first jurisdiction in North America to be rolling out full-day kindergarten with wraparound childcare, around it. And as part of the work that we're going to do in terms of moving forward with Best Start Child and Families Centres, both Charles Pascal and I, and the Minister of Education, have said we've got our sleeves rolled up on childcare. But let's not forget, since 2003, we've increased funding to childcare by 63%. Did we have a huge barrier put in the way when the federal government pulled out? Yes. We were able to stabilize and save those spaces. Were we able to gain a lot more momentum? No. But are families benefiting from all-day kindergarten to the tune that they don't have to pay childcare? Yes.
What was it that you wanted to
I just
challenge?
wanted to comment, with all due respect, we and most of the communities we work with welcome publicly funded all-day kindergarten, but we're not the first in North America. Quebec's had it for 5-year-olds for a number of years, a number of states. So we welcome it. Let's move on to what else is needed.
Yeah, we've lost 200 daycares since 2007, period. 200 daycares privately owned have closed since 2007 under the Liberals' watch.
Tim?
Well, yes, if I could wedge my way in here a little bit, I think we also need a broader discussion. We've, as you rightly pointed out, we've been in recessionary times. We may be heading back. And I think for Greens, what that says to us is we need to be smarter with how we already spend money. And the Green Party of Canada, 2 elections ago, advanced the idea of a guaranteed livable income as a way of collapsing federal, provincial, and municipal social assistance programs into one guaranteed livable income which already has multi-party support there, Hugh Segal of the Conservatives, etc. But our idea, what it also deals with, it deals with the sensitivity that we need to drive up the minimum wage, especially for people living in the most expensive cities, and yet the same minimum wage in rural Ontario, where the cost of living is a lot less. It creates a tension. So we think a guaranteed livable income is a great way to get away from the shame-based problems associated with social assistance, to allow people and end the clawbacks that currently exist for people who start earning income that are on social assistance.
Can I ask you, Laurel Rothman, about that? Because it's true. Senator Hugh Segal, Senator Art Eggleton, there is tripartisan support. How do you say if it's 4 parties? Quadripartisan support?
We'll take it.
Across the board in so many, but this is an idea that's been around for 40 years and has never happened. Is it a good idea?
Well, I think it has some merit. I think what we maybe need to do, people may know there was an important research experiment on this in Manitoba that had some good outcomes. The outcomes being kids staying in school for longer periods of time, finishing high school, going to postgraduate, women's increase in the labor market, and other kinds of things. So we have a little bit of data. We sure could use more. I don't know. Some wonder whether one outcome of the social assistance review might be a pilot project where we really set it up to see if it could work and how, and maybe that's a way to tease the federal government to get involved. I don't know.
When is this review going to report?
So let's talk about the Social Assistance Review. The Social Assistance Review is being led by Francis Lankin and Dr. Munir Sheikh, 2 well-respected individuals.
NDP cabinet
yes,
minister?
and former head of Stats Canada. So we're going to have somebody who understands the data. Biggest review that we've undertaken in this province in many, many decades, and it's a very engaging conversation that's being had right across the province. And it is part of how do you move forward? You know, how do you build a system that works, that lifts families out of poverty? How do you tie all these pieces together? So it's a very exciting opportunity. They're going to be having some recommendations in the fall. They're out on consultation. They're going to be establishing a position paper. They're arm's length from the government, which I think is very important.
Are you committing to do whatever they recommend?
To give that advice. And we're very anxious to get their advice going forward, because we set out our strategy in 2008. We've reported in the subsequent years, and we are committed to doing this poverty reduction strategy for the 5 years and then coming forward with the next poverty reduction. And when Laurel talks about the issues with respect to dental, I mean, that's a prime example of we've moved forward with Children's Healthy Smiles, with preventative dental. We have emergency dental.
Okay.
And is there more to do? Of course there is.
Let me ask Sherry about this.
For the first time in a long time,
Okay.
you have a government that's wanting to do it.
Laurel, so hang in there with me, okay? We have a minimum wage that's north of $10 an hour in Ontario today, if I may say, because of you. You made a big stink in the Ontario legislature about it, and as a result, these guys acted on it. But let's get into some discussion here about whether that actually alleviates poverty in the province of Ontario today.
Well,
do you think it does?
Well, I think a million Ontarians got a 28% increase because of that campaign that we wrought from. Very proud of a number of people, not just myself, that engaged in that. No, it's not enough. In fact, we were very sad that, again, McGuinty did not raise the minimum wage. We think it should be at least $11 and then indexed to inflation so that we don't have to go through these battles every 3 or 4 years. But that's just the beginning. I mean, to get back to the social assistance, I would like to ask Laura why they still claw back. Joe Fiorito wrote a great column on this. Why is somebody who is disabled, cannot work, if they marry, loses their benefits? This is the kind of ridiculous enactment that doesn't take a social assistance review to look at. They could do something about it, or should have done something about it in the last 8 years.
Okay, I don't want to let minimum wage go away, but in the meantime, do you want to answer that question?
But we ended the deduction of the federal national child benefit, and we're the party who simplified the rules around earnings and have allowed people to work more and earn more. It's a work in progress. You have to take a number of initiatives. We had some early identified areas. We've made those changes. The rest is bundled into a full and comprehensive social assistance review, and we're making progress even despite very challenging economic times in the province.
Who's right here?
Let me say my thing.
Okay.
Okay. With all due respect, the minimum wage has gone up. We still have almost 1 in 3 children living in poverty who have a parent who works full time.
It's the highest minimum wage in Canada, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is the highest minimum wage in
But
Canada.
we agree it has to go to 11. And you know what? And we have to have our municipalities and others working toward a living wage. The living wage for the City of Toronto, meaning for 2 parents, 2 children, to be able to pay for health, education, and the tiny bit of recreation that people need to stay fit, as well as a roof over their head, is $16.60 an hour. So let's put this in perspective. We need to support the creation of better jobs.
Are you going to create better jobs if you double the minimum wage?
I'm
Not
not
double. You put it up 50%. If you put it up to 16
well,
bucks
I'm not
an hour?
saying you would do it overnight. I would say let's see continuous increases over at least the next 3 years. Let's see the commission, I believe, that was recommended, and I need a refresher on this, of business, labor, and the community sector to set some standards for what we want to achieve with minimum wage.
Tim, hang on, haven't heard from Tim.
Let me jump in. Yeah, no, I mean, we were the first party a few years ago to come forward with the pledge of $10 an hour as the minimum wage, but it is only one of the tools. And if people don't have jobs, for example, that doesn't help them a lot. So, for example, our notion is that what we want to do is delay corporate tax cuts, use that money for youth. Youth are the highest group of unemployed folks, and use that for tax breaks for small and medium businesses, the only businesses that were growing in the last recession, for mentorship, apprenticeship programs, youth employment programs that are going to put people back to work.
But there's a bunch of things percolating here that I want to get everybody to comment on, which is, yes, the minimum wage is above 10 bucks an hour. What is it, 10 and a quarter an hour now? Mm-hmm. And there will be some process going forward, presumably, to see it go higher as the future comes upon us. If you work on the minimum wage, your annual income is $18,500 a year. Poor in Ontario is considered $22,500 a year. So if you work minimum wage, you're definitely below the poverty line. On the other hand, we have, and where did I write this down? Alan Sweetman, who's an economist at McMaster University, who says There is evidence that if you make the minimum wage too high, people will drop out of school to get those jobs if you're a marginal student. And if you make the minimum wage too high, you won't get hired at all. So we got a lot of balls juggling in the air there. Laurel and Sherry, how do you deal with all that?
That's why we're committed to bringing a table together. First of all, we've increased the minimum wage by 50% since we've taken office in 2003. So we have to remember where we came from and the fact that we didn't see increases for many years. So we're up to $10.25. We've said that we'll bring a table with advisory committee, with experts, with business, everybody at the table figuring out how will we move it forward. And that's really important, Steve, because your point is quite valid. It does not do us any good to see a situation where we lose jobs, where we have small employers say, well, then I'll just reduce hours or I won't hire people. We want to find a consensus and establish. But that, again, ties to why the Ontario Child Benefit, as an example, and the housing benefit that we're going to examine are so critical. They're different ways of supporting families, and they support you whether you're working and getting minimum wage or whether you're on social assistance. It allows you to transition, as most families do.
Sherry.
There's no question we need good jobs, not more minimum wage jobs. I mean, that's the critical issue here. With all due respect to Sweetman et al., there's no jurisdictional evidence anywhere in the world that by raising the minimum wage you lose jobs. In Sweden, where they have an 85% unionization rate, and where if you work at McDonald's you're unionized, the minimum wage there is around $13 an hour. De facto, we need more unionized good jobs. We've lost about 250,000 of those in the last 8 years, so we need to help unions organize.
Just to clarify,
yes,
I don't think
absolutely.
Sweetman said you'd lose jobs. He says there is a disincentive.
Okay.
He said if you're a marginal student, you'll drop out if the minimum wage is too attractive.
Well, but that hasn't been lived out in actual history, because we looked at lots of jurisdictional examples, the states, everywhere around the world, and we didn't see that happening. What we saw was that if people can earn a living wage, and I'm not talking about minimum wage, I'm talking about get a good job with good benefits, with a pension plan, something else we haven't talked about, then the whole society benefits. That's reality, and that is the case in places like Northern Europe. There are jurisdictional examples of places where they have high unionization rates, good paying manufacturing jobs, like our parents all experienced in the 50s. I grew up in that kind of world, and it wasn't an NDP world, quite frankly. And there were still more manufacturing jobs. You had a good job, it paid for a house, it paid for a car on one salary.
Those days are gone.
Think how far we've fallen. We've fallen from those days. We need to claim that back, that a good job is a job you can support a family on.
Okay, let me bring, Michael, let's bring this chart up, top of page 3 if we can. This is Ontario children using food banks. These are some disturbing numbers. If you go back to the year 2006, you see where the charts are, 132,000 plus. 07 it went down, 08 it went down, but look what's happened during the Great Recession. Those numbers have really exploded. So now 2010, the last year for which numbers are available, we're up to almost 150,000 children using food banks in the province of Ontario. Laurel, is there anything can be done about this?
Certainly. I mean, I think we look at basic incomes. Social assistance has to be raised, made predictable. Now, that'll take some time, but right now, or shall we say at the beginning of the next government, we can introduce a healthy food supplement. $100 a month, it will make a tremendous difference
How do you do
to
that?
families.
A healthy food supplement, $100 a month. How would that work?
Well, I haven't been in the business of designing that program, but presumably it could be done through the tax system. It could be done on a more regular basis, monthly or quarterly. We have other examples.
Kick up the child benefit
credits.
a bit? Would that do it?
Well, you could kick up the child benefit, but you know what, we haven't here talked about how, in a sense, children may well be the canary in the coal mine. We have increasing poverty among working age adults, let alone seniors we haven't gotten to. But working age adults are a serious concern as well, and we need a strategy that addresses all Ontarians.
Laurel Broden, these numbers are scandalous. I'm not blaming you for them, and the fact is they're here. What does the government say about these numbers?
We say all the more reason why we have our sleeves rolled up and we're tackling child poverty, why we're increasing the student nutrition program, why we created the OCB, full day kindergarten, and why we're working with families. And I think it's so important to remember that we have lived through some very challenging economic times. And in contrast to other provinces where child poverty rates have soared, we have made an impact as a result of what we've undertaken. It would be a lot worse in Ontario. But we don't sit here and say that we're done the work. We're well on our way to tackling a whole bunch of these issues in a comprehensive way where we're helping families, for example, have a tuition grant as a part of the platform, because we know that's ultimately, we're going to get lifelong learners by having them in early years programs. We're going to get them through full day kindergarten, have public education, do well, graduate, and then we need them to go to get the good jobs of the future, like the green economy jobs.
That.
We need to build those jobs.
That's a long-range plan, though. But right now, Tim, there are 150,000 just about kids using food banks right now. Is there anything that can be done in the short term to deal with that?
Absolutely. You'll recall I you introduced the junk food tax as an idea. When I was canvassing the other day, a teacher friend of mine said, Tim, you know, at my local high school at Bloor and Bathurst, we're really excited about having healthy food in the cafeteria. The problem is lots of kids arrive and they can't afford it. And junk food, all the junk food lunches on the periphery of the schoolyard are a lure for kids, are a competitive lure, and they think they're not going to be serving a lot of those healthy lunches to kids. So that's why I think the junk food taxes is an example of a Green Party sort of integrated strategy. It drives preventative health, but it funds the lunch and breakfast programs. You make them free programs, and I dare say free is a powerful world for hungry kids. It's going to do better. It's going to make kids want to eat those healthy lunches.
Last word on this, Sherry?
Investment in childcare spaces, investment in good jobs, investment in minimum wage, and get back in the housing business, which this government has been out of, despite what you've heard. We haven't done a lot of new bills. We haven't lived up to the expectations. We need to do full-scale investment in our children, because it is an investment. It's not an expense. It will end up costing us more if we don't, and that's the simple reality. And besides the ethical issue that any poor child who is starving in a place this rich is an absolute blight upon us all.
We have less than 5 minutes to go here, and I wish we had more time every night, but particularly right now to have this discussion about seniors. What has the government got in the mix? What are its plans as it relates to helping seniors who are living in poverty or close to the poverty line in Ontario today?
Absolutely, and focusing on our seniors who have built our province is critical. Aging at home strategy, over $1 billion invested to support seniors to live in their own homes. In this platform, a commitment to allow a deferral of property tax increases, to provide a renovation tax credit if they need to build a ramp, and focus on the fact that our seniors also need our support and assistance, and we've been doing that. That's part of a comprehensive platform moving forward. We have focused on our kids first, but not exclusively, and we recognize that immediately and in the years ahead, we'll need to keep doing that important work.
Sherry, what does the NDP have to say to seniors?
Well, a great deal. First of all, to do something. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Had a majority government for 8 years. I knock on seniors' doors every day. They're hurting. They can't pay their bills. They can't pay their property taxes. Some of them are going to lose their homes, even though they're paid for. There aren't long-term beds for them. They end up staying in emergency wards, which is ridiculous use of money. We need, again, a strategy. We're proposing that we have one, that we invest in solid long-term care for seniors first and foremost, because that's the most immediate need. Take the HST off their heating and hydro immediately, helped them to keep their homes. I mean, that's what we need to do.
What if you're a tenant?
Again, tenants are suffering more. That brought in a tenant protection package. Again, the Liberal government has not even addressed the tenant issue. We called for a freeze on rents, in fact, during the Great Recession for tenants that needed that. We're calling for landlord licensing so that those properties can be kept up. They're not being kept up. We have seniors, again, who are using food banks in record numbers. They are the other end of the spectrum from children that are going to food banks. And if you look at a food bank lineup, you'll see the two there, the seniors and the children. These are people who work to build Ontario. We're not helping them.
Tim?
I think it's important to reprioritize healthcare spending into creating community care clinics, the frontline clinics to which all healthcare practitioners would be available. But amidst that team would be a seniors care coordinator that would make sure that the seniors are getting the kind of health issues addressed where they want them to be addressed, and access to healthy food is part of that.
Laurel, if we want to bring seniors out of poverty in the province, give us some ideas.
Well, I would say that mostly we focus on children and families, but certainly income is income, and supplementing low income with strategic grants is one way. Whether it's some kind of credit for tenants. I think there are about 140,000 senior-led households living in rental housing. Let's make sure there's enough and suitable rental housing across the province. And let's look at the possibility of a housing benefit, which helps to balance for low and modest income seniors to help pay that rent wherever they are. So those are some ideas.
Do you want to endorse one of these three parties here today based on what you've heard?
No, we don't. We don't. Actually, we don't. We just take a look. We'll be saying, what do the parties have to say in contrast to what we propose? So watch for it, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
You're no fun, Laurel.
Oh, well.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for partaking in our discussion today, starting with Laurel Broden, the Minister of Children and Youth Services, the Liberal candidate looking for re-election in Etobicoke Lakeshore. Are you also the Minister responsible for women's issues?
I am.
You got a
whole other
busy
topic of
portfolio.
conversation.
The two Laurels. There's Laurel Rothman as well from Campaign 2000. And on the other side of the table, Sherry DeNovo looking for re-election for the NDP in Parkdale High Park. And Tim Grant, who's the Green candidate in Trinity Spadina. My thanks to all four of you for coming in tonight for this discussion.
My pleasure.
Thank you.